All right, we are live with the Kink Tank once again, and we're going to have another go at this topic that we tried to cover a couple weeks ago, which is entering into kink relationships. And 2 weeks ago we had tried to do this, and unfortunately I was having technical difficulties, and when the host gets booted off, I guess the broadcast stops. So I'm on a much more stable connection now. We're going to tackle this and move on to another topic. So let's talk about entering into kink relationships and some of the things that are necessary, recommended, different than vanilla relationships. And then we'll take some questions and have a look at some of the conversation, some of the thread posts that people had to contribute to this particular episode, and see if we can expound on those and comment. So what do you guys think? Entering into relationships. What's your advice? Kink relationships specifically.
Being a new person, I think one of the first things that needs to be understated into any new relationship is it just for play? Is it emotional? Do you expect to interact in a vanilla way? Or is it all just behind closed doors?
Okay, so setting or agreeing or communicating about expectations. What you're getting out of this, what I'm getting out of this, is that compatible? Not that we have to be getting the same things out of it. If you like play, and I get something different out of it, that's okay, as long as we understand what the other person is in it for. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's similar in a vanilla relationship when you get together. Is this about sex? Is this a long-term relationship? Are you kind of a rebound person? People have these conversations, pretty frankly, and I think they're healthy conversations to have. I think what makes them different in a kink context is that, in my opinion, there's a lot more dynamics to choose from.
To choose from, and nooks and crannies to sort out and talk about, I think.
Yeah. So it just makes that communication more important.
So,
and I think the other part of that is whether you're going to do it, are we going to do this publicly? Are we going to be involved in community or not? That's a whole other dimension, too, that can kind of trip you up.
Mm-hmm. I would say that, I agree with that, but sort of, I don't know, I lost my train of thought there. My recommendation for most people is to go slow, but I would recommend that for vanilla couples as well. Talking about this conversations that you're going to have, and how do you have that conversation without having the dreaded, so what are we? So what are we? Are we master and slave? Am I just like your play partner, your casual?
I don't know that conversation should be avoided. I think in vanilla relationships it's a lot easier to dance around the topic of, are we exclusive? Are we seeing other people? Are we formal? Are we not formal? Are we telling our friends? I think it's a lot easier to skate that issue in vanilla relationships. In DS, in BDSM kink relationships, I think it's not only fair, but it's a good idea to go ahead and dive in and say, okay, well, what are you looking for? How are we going to fit together? What are our titles and labels? And I'm not a big label guy, but you can have general themes to relationships that I think help identify whether this is dom-sub, whether this is just bedroom. So I think that's totally fine to have the conversation with.
It is, and now that you mention it, I realize that that's only a scary conversation when you feel like your partner doesn't have your views. So if you're feeling like it's kind of casual and they're feeling like it's kind of serious, that's when you cringe when you hear that. But if everybody feels like they're on the same page, then yeah, that's a good thing to bring up or reaffirm.
Well, it has to do with timing too. No one likes on the first date when you sit down at the table and they say, "All right, so do you want to have kids? Are you like on the marriage track?" That kind of a conversation. No one likes that. No one likes that. It's a complete turnoff, and that person is probably just trying to manage expectations and be responsible, but they're just going about it in a way that's kind of abrasive. Same as when you sit down and they go, "All right, so collars, you want to give me one? How do you feel? How do you feel about that?" I think there's a way to ask it and there's a time to ask it, but maybe getting to know someone a little bit in some way is better. It would scare me off if someone did that.
Yes.
I'm going to agree with Josie. Just because we're meeting each other in a kink setting like a munch or a play scene, it's like, hey, I like you. Are you going to be ready for me to tie you up and drag you around the house? I think it does need to be approached as a vanilla, because we're still people. I may like you, but I don't know everything about you. It may take 2 dates for me to find out that you're a smoker, and on the vanilla side, that's not my thing. Even though I'm more kink focused on, I want to be tying people up. I want to be able to smack you with a belt, chain you to the bed when I want. Again, I'm just agreeing with Josie that timing does play a big part of it, because there's other things that need to be worked out first.
Yeah. And sometimes a new kink relationship isn't a kinky relationship. Maybe that's another thing, when you're getting into relationships to keep in mind. Sometimes you're going to meet someone who happens to be kinky, but you don't have a kinky relationship. You just start dating, you start hanging out, you start doing whatever it is that people do that's quote-unquote normal. And that, sometimes that happens. So leading with that other foot might kind of make you lose some relationships just because you went there too fast.
I'll tell you what I've seen at parties that I've kind of liked and enjoyed. A lot of times I will see new couples not dive right in and not play, but for at least a party or two, they'll just kind of walk around and observe and point at things and say, I like this, I don't like this, what do you think about this? And I think that's probably a good way to approach a lot of things.
Yeah,
why don't find a partner and you go ahead.
Why don't vanilla couples sit down and watch porn together before they have sex and be like, yeah, don't do that.
Because the woman would never do it.
Way too vulnerable a position to be in.
But don't you think it would be helpful? It's like walking around at a party saying, I would freak out if you ever tried doing something like that to me, or that looks really hot and I would like to try that someday, or something to that effect. I agree with you, Brian, that and that it kind of goes with my slow down thing. You don't have to jump in and start playing right away. And I think my opinion is that most mistakes that I've made have been done in haste. Not checking myself. And I know that's no fun. Last time we attempted to have this conversation, we spent quite a bit of time talking about new relationship energy, or NRE, as a lot of people call it. And I do want to talk a little bit about that while we're having this conversation. So, Brian, I think you had a good explanation of what new relationship energy is. Can you sort of explain?
I'll be happy to, but I'll also preface this with I was the Lone Ranger in that everyone else was very pro-NRE and I was very anti-NRE.
No, Mike is definitely anti-NRE. Don't.
Yeah, you and I are.
New relationship energy is butterflies. It's it's the kind of head racing butterfly feeling, oh my god, this is so much fun, I've been looking for this, and this is going to go on for so long, it's going to be forever, we're going to do all these crazy things all at once, and I'm just going to dive in, and you kind of get your head spun, is a term I like to use with it. A lot of people enjoy, and this is not specific to kink relationships, vanilla relationships do this too, it's something that can cause some problems or cause you to jump in or do things in haste that maybe you wouldn't do right away if you really kind of stepped back and kind of had like a self-gut check and evaluated the reality of the situation. But it's fun and it's new and it's puppy love and everybody loves it.
It was great. Toy Story 3 had a really great NRE scene with, of course, Barbie had been part of the mix, part of the crew. Well, she finally meets Ken, and they just lose, and it's all the cutesy talk that they do together, and can't stop. They're just wrapped with each other, and everybody's like, this is I can't stand watching this. It's I can't. dispute that that is a fun and exciting thing. But I think the reason why I'm, extra cautious during that time and why I sort of fight against those urges is because I seem to make a lot of mistakes during that period and, suspending good judgment. But some people like to wrap themselves in it and roll around in it, and that's, part of the wonder and part of the greatness of falling in love with someone.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with letting yourself feel that and enjoying it for what it is. But I think a lot of people decide not to let themselves believe it is what it is. I learned a long time ago that every relationship is 50-50. And what I mean by that is there's a 50% chance that you're going to stay with this person forever or a 50% chance that you're going to break up.
I think that's awfully optimistic.
Well, there's two possibilities,
That I buy.
Okay, I may have worded that incorrectly. Mathematically, you have two possibilities of it's going to last forever. You're going to have that white picket fence with the dog and the dungeon in the basement, or you're just going to break up horribly.
Yeah. So this kind of came up in my mind a little earlier when we were talking about, talking together. And in effect, what you're doing at that point is negotiating. Whether you're sitting down to have a negotiation or whether you're just sort of listening to each other and kind of finding out what the other likes and what their goals are in the relationship, or whether they have any designs or goals in the relationship. Should those conversations be done, let's say, without power exchange, sort of sans role, where when we're talking about putting together a play scene, just sort of like play partners, temporary, you, me, we meet at a party, we have some chemistry, we're going to do a scene, but we've never met before. A lot of people feel like negotiation should be done on even keel. Do you think that that's the same case when communicating about relationships? Should there be topics that that a dominant could decide that they're not going to talk about?
Well, I think at the beginning of a relationship is the only time that you really have that even keel, because you've not started setting a rhythm or mood for somebody to naturally have the upper hand or lower hand. You both discovered that you like each other, and then you have enough things in common to want to continue it with that. And if you don't take advantage of that, like that NRE, then it starts becoming lopsided, where it's more demands than it is negotiations.
I have to disagree with you there, though. That may be the way I like to do it. That may be the way that you do it. But how many relationships have you seen that started with, "Hello, sir. It's very nice to meet you. Can I lick your boots later?" That they. Or it's a chat. It's an online chat. Oh, your profile says you're looking for a master, and I'm a big badass, awesome dude. And the dynamics sort of start right away. I prefer to cultivate these things a little bit more, naturally or in a more vanilla way until we figure out what the dynamics are. But go ahead, Ray.
I'm just saying, I agree with you. Your example might be a little bit extreme. Nobody's going to come up and let me lick your boot unless my master over there told me to do it. But I think that discovery conversation of, oh, what are you into? Are you a top or bottom? And at that point, it starts setting the mood. If 2 or 3 play scenes later or munches, you decide to go further and initiate the relationship, you've kind of got that predisposition that you're going to be a sub and I'm going to be a dom.
Yeah, I think some people do that. I do understand, though, this place where I think can get blown out of proportion. But I think this thing where you meet someone and you just feel this chemistry with that person. There are some people that you meet and you see these people, they get into relationships immediately and they're strong and they're, they just kind of get swept away with this feeling, because the first time they did meet him, they totally did lean over to you and go, oh, I'm going to lick his boots, like, I'm going over there now. Sometimes you just exchange with people in that way, and it's really organic. You're not forcing it. You just felt it. I think feeling that way and negotiating from that place are two completely different things. And I think negotiating from that place is dangerous, almost more so to the top side than the bottom side, because what I think that sets you up for later is for that person, bottom side person, to say, well, we were negotiating. I was just trying to be, he made all the rules and I didn't have any input because, I was on the bottom, and, these kind of excuses. And in the end, they make the top person look bad.
I'm a negotiation junkie. I do it all the time. A lot of people would say I do it way too frequently. My primary and I renegotiate every 2 weeks. Now, it's not start to finish, top to bottom, but we do check in and negotiate every 2 weeks. And, Michael, to answer your question, we do it completely out of role. There is no top bottom. And we've been together for so long. There's always a little bit of top bottom dynamic to us. But we try and throw that out the window as best we possibly can, during this hour or 2 hours or whatever it takes. And I think that to answer the second part of your question, is it fair for is it fair for a top or a bottom, either one, to dodge topics or have something that they're not willing to talk about? Absolutely. That's part of being even. That's part of having these conversations sans role is, you know what, I'm not ready to discuss that right now. I'm not ready to discuss that in a month. I'm not ready to discuss that ever. And if that is something that is, a deal breaker, well, then you walk away from the table and maybe walk away from the relationship. But I think that part of the power of negotiation is both parties have the power to say what they want, to express their needs, to talk about things that are important to them, and to say, hey, here are my triggers, and by the way, you asking me to talk about one of those things, that's a trigger for me.
I think this idea of negotiating while in new relationship energy, though, if that's what we're talking about, it's not the same as like driving drunk.
I think it kind of is. I mean,
it's not the same as being drunk. You're not completely out of control, and if you're that in it, I agree with you there. If you're that kind of person who's like literally doodling the name of that person on your notebook and shit, maybe you shouldn't be negotiating from that place, because you're not going to ask for what you need. You're going to ask for what they want because you want it so much.
Actually, right. I do see some similarities between NRE and being drunk, or maybe just a little bit tipsy.
I don't think it's that severe.
And the similarities are, a lot of people are unwilling to admit when they're in it. A lot of people are unwilling to say, "Oh yeah, I know I'm a little bit tipsy," or "Yeah, I know I know I'm a little bit head over heels right now, and I'm about to make poor decisions."
I'll agree with that last statement. NRE is like being drunk, not to the point of DUI and driving a motor vehicle and not having control, but losing the inhibition to say, I don't want to try that because I want to keep this going. I like the way this feels. I like this new partner. So it kind of blurs your judgment. Let's brand ourselves.
It just kind of dulls the edges a little bit. Ray, your example before was, in a vanilla context, somebody who smokes isn't somebody that you would want to have a relationship with. It's kind of a thing for you. But if they were really hot and you were just really kind of swept up by them, and you really wanted to play with them, you're thinking to yourself, God, she's a smoker. Well. How important really is that to me? And then you start.
You let that go, and I know I've been in several situations where she is smoking hot. I've heard she smokes, she pokes. I'm gonna let this fly, test that waters. Maybe there'll be some other redeeming qualities, and maybe smoking isn't such a hard limit for me on the vanilla side.
Yeah, and it's not just that thing. It's them talking shit about their exes, and you're thinking, that's kind of a turn off, but it's not that big a deal. It doesn't. Maybe you're not like completely detached from reality and ignoring all the red flags, but to me, it kind of dulls my senses to that because I'm justifying these things in my head to get to the objective. And I think that's a bad place to negotiate from. And when you're talking, well, you're also in an intense period of discovery with a person. Not only that, but finding commonalities is what that's the enjoyable part. It's like, you're a Libra, well, I'm a Libra, or maybe Libras don't get along. You're a Libra, great, because I'm a Scorpio and we go together well. You have an aunt named Jeanette too. Wow, look, it's so similar. We're fated to be together. There's a lot of that sort of silliness going on where we celebrate those things that reaffirm that this is a great thing that we're getting into, but then we sort of gloss over or minimize the things that would otherwise be cause for concern.
It's funny the way you mentioned that. It almost sounded like you were talking about like a gambling addiction, where I'm going to downplay all the negatives and really upplay all the positives of what's going on. And I do think NRE has that effect on new beginning relationships. It's not a bad thing. It's like finding sugar in your coffee. Now I know it can have a sweet taste, and I can enjoy it more than I would have enjoyed just regular black coffee. But you kind of have to know what you're getting into, and know that new energy is eventually going to fade, and realize it's still coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think you guys are really cynical about that whole idea. You're not negotiating your whole life away. It's not like you make one negotiation, then you never revisit it again. I think sometimes the conversations that you have while you're in that kind of crazy, fuzzy, happy feels place can be really interesting. And you might be willing to try things that maybe you weren't willing to try with other people. So maybe we're not talking about a smoker, we're talking about a rope guy. And you're like, fucking rope people.
No, I'm talking about moving in with somebody. That's a decision that I made.
Well, that's a different thing, though. That is a crazy decision. All love in my heart. That's a crazy decision to make while under the influence of
But it's hard to.
But if we're talking about new relationships, I don't know. I don't think that this is such a bad thing. I think we're kind of catastrophizing it a little bit. I think there can be positives to negotiating under that influence in some ways, because you might try something you weren't interested in before. And you might give someone a chance who you wouldn't have given a chance to.
And if you're all of a sudden you've never been interested in rope and you're hanging out with some hot ropey guy and all of a sudden you want to do some rope, that's one thing. But if you are a new couple at a party and you're walking around and you happen past the medical table and see some needle play, and the female or the bottom might say, hey, that looks hot, and the top says, oh yeah, let's totally do that. I've never done that before, but let's swing past Walgreens on the way home. That may not be a good idea. So I think that
swing by the internet on the way home and looking up needle play and then going to the needle supply store and saying, hey, let's give it a try. I don't see anything wrong with that.
I just think it's important to check yourself, to really identify NRE, accept it for what it is, realize when you're in it, and enjoy it while it lasts, but don't go head over heels and take it too far.
Well, that's kind of where I've come to with it, is that it's fun when you realize what when you're aware of the fact that you are maybe a little bit drunk, maybe making the decision to move in with somebody isn't the decision you should be making right now. Maybe you should wait a little bit. But not everybody can see that from the inside when you're in it. Oh no, it's true love. It's fated to happen. It's a little objectivity. Listen to your friends a little bit. That's usually
I think if
valuable.
If we're going to stay with this alcohol and drinking analogy, maybe NRE for a new couple is like underage drinking. It's amazing. You want to do it all the time. You know that repercussions happen, like you woke up in the front lawn, but you don't care because you had the time of your life. As you get a little bit older, you realize 2, 3 cocktails and a beer, I'm going to have a good time for the rest of the night. I should maybe leave my wallet in my car so that
Well, that's the
I'm
thing.
not buying drinks for everybody. I'm not trying to be cynical. I'm just saying with time, you learn to know what the experience is and enjoy it while you can, and lessen what the catastrophes could be. Maybe that is a slightly cynical view, but I'm just staying with the analogy.
I don't know. I think grab hold of it, roll around in it, maybe just postpone that conversation. Oh, push it down the road a little.
I'm going to stick with the analogy, and I'm going to say if you are head over heels and you're ignoring all the flags and you're upplaying all the upsides and downplaying all the downsides,
Break up with them
uh,
immediately.
at the end of the
Wow.
night or
Yeah.
at the end of the NRE,
So
you're
fun.
gonna you're when everything's all said and done, and when that thing is out of your system, you're gonna wake up one morning, roll over, and there's gonna be somebody that is in your bed that you're like, oh my God, how did this person get in my bed? Like
Okay.
how did I let it get this far?
I disagree. I have something else we can talk about that has nothing to do with that analogy. About getting into new relationships is a pet peeve I have of mine. Don't get in with a list. I think going in with a prescriptive list of things that you want, same as in a vanilla context. If you go into a bar and say, all right, here's my list. I want a 6 foot tall, blonde haired executive type who likes dogs but really prefers cats, and this big long laundry list of things, your likelihood of finding someone is low, and your likelihood of seeming, I don't know, a little bit high maintenance is high. I think it's the same in the kink community. I see it really often. I want a master. You go in there just not knowing anybody and say, I am a submissive. I want a master, not anything else. Like, that's what I want because I read about it on the internet, and that sounds like what I want. I think they set themselves up for failure, and they seem to, especially when it comes to community, they tend to not like community very much. So those people are unsuccessful with that integration most of the time, and I think that list has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, well, coming in looking for something in particular is, I think, the first mistake. But then, having such a narrow scope of the type of person that you'd like to have a relationship with, and that depends. I mean, I'm going to argue for Shane since he's not here tonight. He's usually on here, and he would say, I'm pretty sure that that I don't think that's as big a peeve for him because he feels, as he says, his relationships flow from the dynamic, where I feel the opposite, that the dynamic flows from the relationship. So I guess it depends on what kind of style, I don't know that everybody's like me. I know I'm happiest when I find the person I want to relate to and then decide what that relationship's going to look like rather than the other way around. I know a lot of people, not just criteria for what their partner should have, he should be this tall and in this, income bracket or whatever, but just in the, I want a daddy, or I want, I want a play partner or a top, then you're just looking for people to fill those roles. You're pouring somebody into a mold rather than just sort of making the mold around them. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm going to come in and be the tiebreaker then between you and Shane, and I'm going to go back to a conversation that we covered during the How to Be a Good Newbie. And one of the topics was don't go shopping, or don't come expecting to find somebody. Don't come with a big, long laundry list. And Josie points out, not to come with a big list. I disagree. Come with a big list. Come with a huge, enormous, really, really detailed, specific list, but then be really flexible about it.
Yeah, but who do you know with a super detailed list that is flexible about said list?
Well, as a new
Actual
person to the
people.
group,
It depends on.
I came to.
Go ahead, Ray.
Well, I'm just going to say, as a new person, to kind of interject in there, I know I came in the munch thinking, hey, there's a possibility to meet new people. I might even find a relationship. I know what my personal likes are, and that's what I'm going to say with the super incredible detail is I know what I like, But Josie, if I've gone there and only looked for a short redhead who's into ropes, I'd have walked away after 30 minutes because this is not the much for me. No, I know what I like, and I didn't see it there. That doesn't mean I shouldn't talk to everybody else, have an open mind. I might find people who are into ropes and who are into something else that can teach me and expand on me. And my advice to anybody coming into a munch looking for a potential for a partner relationship is uh, be flexible. Know what you want, but definitely be flexible. Because
Yeah,
you
I
are
think
going to find
that
things
idea.
that you're
Yeah,
going to find
exactly. I
things
think
that
that
you're
idea
going to
of having
like.
those kind of vague ideas of what you want, there's nothing wrong with that. If you know you're into rope, you're into it. Be into it. That's awesome.
But I don't know if I'm into electric plate or suction cups or needles and medical. I don't know because I haven't had the chance to play. I came in with kind of my seed of kink, and it needs to be watered by the community, or I'm just going to be one of those guys on Craigslist putting out ads for rope bottoms. Really creepy kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can't come in and only shop your specific list because you're going to be disappointed. Like you said, you're going to walk away in 30 minutes because there's no short redhead who's a rope slut. Um, but I am also a proponent of the fact that you can't find what you're looking for if you don't know what that is. Like you
Yeah.
have to know yourself.
Right, but I was laughing a little bit because Josie, the answer to your question is, of those people with the very detailed list, how many of them stick to that? Well, that all depends on how hot you are for the other person.
Right.
Because you know when you are stuck in that NRE or that intense interest, or like you're really just kind of smitten by the person. Well, okay, they're not into this. That's okay because they still like all the other stuff, and we can. I didn't really need that anyways, but it's okay.
And I've seen people where it doesn't matter what they're into. There was a guy, and I'm sure it happens with women too, but there was a guy that came in who was very, very attractive, and he turned a whole lot of heads right from the very beginning. And even my girl was like, I don't know who he is, I don't know what his name is, I don't know what he's into, but I want to. He was very tall. She said, I want to climb him like a spider monkey.
Mhm.
And I'm sure she would have been very willing to, at least entertain a lot of ideas just because a guy is hot, or on the reverse, just because a girl is hot. So I agree with that.
Well,
All
and isn't that the whole point of dating to find people, not necessarily, but a fantasy is a fantasy because it's something you don't get all the time. It's like meeting your hero when you're a kid. Cops, soldiers, firefighters are these amazing people, but as you get older and you know a few cops, you know a few firefighters, you know a few soldiers, uh, they don't live up to where you put that pedestal of them because you only see or heroize that small portion of their life.
right.
So you have to be flexible when dating, or you're going to wind up miserable looking for that perfect somebody that's never going to come around because when you do meet them, they still don't meet your expectations.
Well, I wanted to take a look at one of these questions that we had here, which was, are there does the purpose of the relationship? I mean, because we have a wide variety to pick from, whether it's like fuck buddies, casual friends, play partners, master and slave, daddy boy, whatever it is. Does the purpose, whether it's service or play or romance, affect the way that you feel the a good way to enter into a relationship? I mean, would you give different answers to different people depending on what they wanted, or would you say that there are good practices that apply across the board? So I feel like a lot of communicating and negotiating. I think that you could say that that's something that's applicable to all of those styles. Agreed?
Yeah.
Are there any that are specific? Well, like, but the contents of that negotiation, I guess, is what would change depending on
Yeah,
the
I feel
type of
like in all
relationship.
those different relationship styles, there's a lot of different topics to cover. I would take a fuck buddy to be the easiest. I don't think there's a lot of negotiation that needs to happen there. Um, how often do you have other partners? What are the safety precautions we're taking? And that's pretty much it, right? Where a master-slave relationship, there's going to be a whole lot more questions to ask. So I do think that the type of negotiation that you're having, and even if you're having the negotiation just to feel someone out before you put labels or build a dynamic, I think the types of questions and answers that are asked and given lend themselves to what type of relationship or dynamic you're going to have.
Okay. I like it. I had somebody in the thread talk a little bit about community involvement, and we've talked a little bit about that as well in this conversation. That does the entering into relationships with other members of the community, is that different than non-community members? I mean, for yourself, for instance. I mean, to me, I think the process for it is with a community member is maybe a little bit more measured, I guess. But the chances are that if they weren't community involved, and because that's sort of, to me, that's important, and it's a big part of my life, that if they're not already involved, they soon will be. Or I don't know how invested I would get in a person who was unwilling to be involved, because all my friends are there. That's all. A lot of my time and energy goes into it. So does that affect someone's community involvement? Does that affect the way that you go into it?
Well, on the vanilla.
I'm sorry, Josie.
Does it change the process, or?
Yeah, or maybe we're talking a lot in this conversation about the way things should go, but let's talk a little bit about personal experience and the way that we personally do things. Does it affect the way that you enter into relationships, whether they are involved in community or not?
I think there's a culture for those people, for sure.
You think that there's, I'm sorry?
I think people who are involved in community tend to have a certain culture about how to go about these things. There's a certain kind of accepted etiquette. There's a certain kind of the way that the good kids do it and the way that the bad kids do it, kind of an idea. So I feel like it does change it when you're getting into a relationship with someone who is in community. I think it offers up some kind of protective factors. So there can be some good things that can come from getting involved with someone who is involved in community, especially if you haven't been involved in community yourself. Because a framework is kind of almost there. I mean, even we tend to talk about this stuff a lot, but even when we don't talk about it, I think it kind of gets understood. You see people get into relationships, and there's kind of a way that a lot of people go about it. I think in that way, I think it does make it different.
Well, I think community definitely influences the way you get into a relationship and how the relationship's going to shape out. The analogy on the vanilla side would be meeting or going on a date from somebody from a church. It's not just about you talking to them. The entire community knows about it. The entire community is going to have their opinion on it, and it does add some additional pressures or support depending on whether the community thinks that you should or shouldn't. I'll bring Shane back into this because I saw his advice. If I go about the procedure and go, hey, Shane, I see this person over there. I think you might know them for a while. Would you vet for them? And if he says no, that immediately puts the pressure on me to start backing off the relationship. If I trust in his vetting, or if I decide to ignore his vetting completely and go with that NRE and just enjoy it for what it is, I think you'll always feel that pressure from the community of, we're just waiting for that to blow up. That's going to be fun to watch.
You do bring up a good point. I think that when you're talking about a relationship with somebody in the community or who is involved in the BDSM community, that you might have some extra resources there that you would be, I don't know, silly not to use. That there are people that have known this person for a while or have seen other relationships of theirs, or who can tell you what they think of that person. And with a non-community involved person, you don't necessarily have that.
That you also kind of get some skewed viewpoints. For example, if I want to start dating somebody that I know has already dated around in the community, um, that puts pressures on. Like, I like hanging out with him, but I know that he's dated my partner before. That's going to make it a little awkward, or it may even make it easier because now we can hang out and be part of that cool kid table together. Um, because we have something mutual in our styles, in our choices in partners. Um, so it does have its benefits. I'm not completely discrediting, sharing partners, but I feel like it does add that pressure to the relationship
Okay.
from the get-go.
Well, what are let's talk about some of the mistakes that we've made or some of the mistakes that we've seen. Um, my big one is, and I've been guilty of this before. I've kind of changed my style. It doesn't work for me, and maybe for some people it works very well. I don't know. It's hard. I don't see the success rate being highly likely. That idea of the one size fits all relationship. So I had a submissive, and we had a certain relationship, and they did these chores for me, and I did these things for them, and this was the etiquette. They called me sir, and they made my coffee, and they shined my boots. That getting into another relationship. This bothered me about 50 Shades of Grey as well. As much negotiation as they did in that movie, he had a contract put together with a lot of things on it without knowing her very well. And to me, that's putting the cart before the horse. That's saying, I want you to be this person to me. And that's fine if that's what you like, if that's what you want. If you're not interested in a relationship that's any other way, okay. But I think the mistake is treating, not modifying the relationships around the people, keeping the dynamics consistent between past relationships and present relationships. Am I making sense? Is there a better way to say that?
Yeah, it sounds like you're always trying to put somebody into the rebound because you're static in what you like and what you need. As far as that contract 50 Shades of Grey, I kind of liked it. I thought it was interesting because it threw everything out there. And just because it's out there as a top doesn't mean I want to do it. But if you're interested to it, I don't want to close that door. I would like to see a complete list between two partners and just immediately scratching things off together, or highlighting things that you definitely want to do together.
Mm-hmm.
So it does have a mistake as wanting to have everybody be the same person for you, because you're not letting that person be themselves.
Well said.
And it really kills a lot of possibilities. It's almost going back to that fantasy. You're building a fantasy, and you'll take anybody who plays with you into that. And even when they can achieve that fantasy for you, you're just going to raise it up that much more.
Okay. What are some of the other mistakes that you see, or that you've made? Mistakes in entering into relationships, kink relationships.
Definitely moving too fast without negotiating. Somebody found out I was in the ropes. We talk about there being titles, there being if we were just fuck buddies, and we also didn't talk about the safety of it. Just went into it and middle of a scene, realized that there's a bad joint. Well, that's probably the wrong time to find out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a learning experience. You have to make mistakes to learn from them, and hopefully you do.
Well, hopefully the consequences aren't too high. Anyone else?
Some of the mistakes that I've seen and have heard about have been, dreamland versus reality. You sit down, you talk about someone. I want this. I want you to fill this and this and this and do this and this and this, and in return, I'll do this and this and this. And then life happens, and then you realize, well, your work schedule doesn't quite line up with the way I thought it was going to, or our sleep schedules are oddly different. And oh, I forgot to tell you, I'm in Cleveland every single weekend. So I think that even if you do have similar interests and similar goals, you have to sit down and think about whether or not those things are realistic or achievable.
Yeah. I think one that I have made, or that I used to make, especially, when I was new, because I was making a big distinction between getting into a kink relationship and getting into a vanilla relationship, was I felt the need to kind of to label myself. So getting into a kink relationship, I felt the need to go, okay, I am going to be a bottom, or I'm going to be, especially with people that I saw in the community that I was interested in. I thought, okay, clearly top identified person. I will now try to make myself into that ideal person. I just was trying to suit the label because so many people had them. I was introducing myself to them, and before I even knew their name, they were saying what they were into and what their power orientation was, which I thought was weird, but I was new, so I thought that was normal.
Just the way it worked, yeah.
Yeah, and I really, that was a bad choice for me. For some people, they're really strongly identified and their identity is really important. I think for me, that really ended up kind of choking off some of my growth early on, and it made me very uncomfortable. It almost made me kind of want to leave because I wasn't bottomy enough, or I wasn't strongly identified with any of those labels at that time. So I think giving yourself, not just your relationship, but you as the member of your relationship, that room to kind of grow into who you're going to be by yourself and with that person, because anyone who says that the person you're in a relationship with doesn't influence that growth is dead wrong. They absolutely influence the way that you are, and the way you are with one partner may be nothing like the way you are with another partner. And I think that's a huge difference between being in a kink relationship and being in other kinds of relationships. That sort of growth, giving yourself that space, that was a tremendous lesson that I learned.
Excellent. I think we'll leave that there. Unless someone has anything to add about entering into relationships, relationships.
It might be worthwhile to just talk briefly on how to enter in a relationship with owned property. How do you approach someone's in a polyamorous relationship? How do you approach someone's slave or someone's submissive about play? Do you follow protocol? Do you go to the owner first? How much talking do you do with the bottom before you figure out if you're interested? What does that look like?
I think that's kind of a big can of worms. Well, and I think, in my opinion to that, and I may be the strong minority, but I think you approach everybody the same until they give you the indication that that's not okay. Because it's not really because at that point you're kind of involving me in your play in a way that I'm not consenting to. So if I go up and say, hey, Brian, what's up? And you go, excuse me, you're not addressing me properly. Or if I go up to your person that you're with and I say, oh, hi, nice to meet you, and they say, what the fuck is your problem? You need to talk to Brian before you talk to me.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to talk to you. Duh.
Yeah, I'm gonna think you're kind of a jerk. I will respect that dynamic in the dungeon. I won't walk up and smack her on the ass. But that's only because I know you and you've indicated that to me.
FYI, she'd dig that.
Good. I'll write that down.
So I guess I've never approached anybody in that kind of relationship, and I'm going to have to agree with Josie that unless I know that's what's happening, I'm going to talk to them like they're a normal person, and it's been my experience to just get to know the person. Even though we're in the dungeon, you're going to show me your kink if you want to, or if I hang out around enough, I'll see what you're into and play. But I would like to get to know you as a person. What kind of brought you around? Do you have any other interests outside of this that we can just have a conversation while maybe you're smoking and I'm having a drink of beer or something? Just to have a conversation.
If they're smoking, haven't you lost interest already?
Exactly. I don't want to play with them, but maybe they could offer me some insight into needle play or how to approach other
Please
tops
don't
or
do that.
bottoms.
Raise
Or
the
maybe you want to play with them, you just don't want to kiss them now. I don't know.
Well, no, that's the thing. I mean, I think in that situation, it's that person's responsibility. So that's true. A lot of people take that dynamic very seriously, and that would be a big offense. But in that situation, if Ray walks up to that girl and that girl knows that they have a protocol involved, maybe she'll say hi. Maybe he'll make it clear to her in some way that he's interested in her. And at that point, if she knows that her rules are that she needs to go talk to Brian. It's on her. It's not Ray is not the asshole in this situation. She is if she doesn't say anything.
And I agree. I think we're all unanimous here, but I did want to throw out that topic just because I felt like it did deserve at least a couple words on how to enter a new relationship. Because if you're in a community, there might be situations where you are interested in someone that belongs to someone else or is in a heavy dynamic with someone else. So I think we're all in agreement, but I do think it deserved at least a few minutes.
I agree. It's a really good point.
All right, thank you, everyone. We'll wrap up that topic right now. And I don't know, I might have to take a break for a smoke. I think maybe I can make it another 45 minutes through. We'll see. But I think we're going to start this next topic, which is sort of related. Let's get on with the breaking up well part, which I think is it's a topic that's sort of near and dear to my heart because I think there's an art to it. I think a lot of people are bad at it. I think that it's a good sort of skill to have. Well, I don't know if it's a skill because it seems like there are some folks who, time after time, given the opportunity to break up well or make the right choices to ease the heartbreak, drama, loneliness, hatred, they always still seem to make bad decisions when it comes to this. So let's talk a little bit about breaking up. Let's talk a little bit about breaking up well. Do you guys have any pointers for people when things just can't go any further and it needs to end? What can a person do to make that the least shitty situation possible? Not the best not the best situation, because sometimes I feel like there aren't any good choices here. There are just less bad choices.
And I'm going to have to disagree with you, Michael. I think breaking up isn't necessarily a skill, but it is a tool that you have in your handbag because it's a culmination of a lot of things. Being able to communicate, being able to express kind of what went wrong in a way that doesn't hurt anybody, and just really letting people express emotions, because the breakup's going to be emotional. You place a lot of trust in somebody, and all of a sudden you feel like you've been abandoned or somebody's abused that trust. So my first tip for breaking up is just plan for it. People in a vanilla, they would say, break up in person. Don't do it over a text message. It's best to do it in a public place. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if you're going to break up, especially in a kink relationship, it needs to be you need a few hours for it. There may be some waterworks, or there may just be let me grab my shit out of your place and I'm walking out of here. Don't call me again. But I think planning into that worst case event, because by that point you should know your partner and know what they're going to need to be able to make a clean break.
Yeah. I think too, with that, I don't remember if we talked about this last time or if this was just a private conversation that we had, but we were talking about the responsibility, whose responsibility it was to do exactly what you're saying. Is it basically we were having this conversation of, is it the topsides person? Is it entirely their responsibility to take care of that, to break up with someone in a way that they know that makes sure the other person is okay? And I can't remember. Does anyone else remember what we were talking about?
I
think that was it. I think that was it, and I think we decided unanimously that it is not exclusively up to the top to make sure that things go right. When the breakup happens, your roles are dropped, or essentially at that point, right? So there is no more relationship, there is no top bottom, there is no more, oh, I have to take care of this person or be extra sensitive or bend over backwards to make sure that they're okay, even though that's something that the top might have done 2 or 3 days ago, or that the bottom might have done 2 or 3 days ago. Um, and I think that it's important that both people be adult and try and respect each other the best they can. And if it's a horrible breakup, then take some time apart. Certainly don't go bad mouthing the other person to everyone else in the community. I mean, people talk. That's going to happen. Certainly, you're going to talk to your friends, and I think that one of the pitfalls to try and avoid to an outsider is picking a side. I think that when there are couples in the community that break up, I don't want to pick a side. And in the thread that was that preceded this Kink Tank episode, one of our very fond people in the community named Mark is married to Shell, and he said, he just asked, hey, how would you guys treat my wife? And I think that it speaks a lot to him for him to be worried about that. And I think that were them or any other big couple in the community to break up, hopefully they would all come out with the same number of friends post breakup.
Okay, I do want to interject something in there that you were saying, about responsibilities, and I don't disagree with you in that, that it's not purely on the top or the dominant or the master, the sort of big letter person. But there are relationships possibly cultivated over long periods of time, and the dynamics of that relationship is that the submissive, slave, property, bottom is dependent on their partner by design. So they don't have permission to work. They don't have permission to their life may have been governed so intensely by their partner that just breaking up and then and then now all my responsibility is absolved is a bad idea, I think, in that case. So if I have a slave that I don't permit to work outside the home, and they have been serving me for the last 10 years and passing up opportunities for education and for work and for socialization, etc., and then I decide that I'm done with the relationship, I feel like that owner or master or mistress does have a responsibility to make sure that breakup goes well.
To what extent?
Do that. Like, that's the right thing to do, but I don't think it's their responsibility, because that person who agreed to be in that relationship knew that was the risk. I mean, you have to know that that's a part of what you're agreeing to. But I agree with you. It is definitely an asshole move in that sort of extreme example to just, like, kick that person to the curb and make them dependent and then not take care of that. But I don't think it's a responsibility.
I think if the relationship were, entered into well, or sort of that it was negotiated, that would be something you might want to negotiate into the relationship. What happens when we're done?
Yeah.
Can we do? Is that one of the things that we can say that breaking up? How do you break up well? Well, you talk yourselves through it. How are we going to break up? What's going to happen?
I don't think this problem is kink exclusive. I think what I'm hearing you talk about is divorce, and I think I'm hearing you talk about a stay-at-home mom that has been raising 3 kids, has been soccer mom for 10 years, and all of a sudden, Mr. Man or Mr. Father or Mr. Husband has been banging a secretary and decides to leave or whatever. There are this feels very much the same. I know maybe there's some more legal ramifications or some more legal actions that can happen if there's a formal wedding. Guys, check your laws state to state. You might have legal recourse, but in terms of responsibility, I think that the partner knows, hey, this is my role in the relationship. I'm willing to accept this role, and to raise point mathematically, there are one of two outcomes that are going to happen, and I think it's just part of life is going out and you get burned sometimes, and you hope that you get burned, quicker than 10 years in. But so I agree that the right thing to do is to talk things out, and the right thing to do is to, if you're in a relationship the way that Michael was describing, where you've been the master and you've had your slave passing up job opportunities, passing up education opportunities. Certainly the right thing to do is to help in any way you can. I don't know that it's obligatory, and I don't know to what extent that help would or should go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the responsibility for the actual breakup, even in a kink relationship, falls on the person who's unhappy with where the relationship is. And if you're talking about a master-slave relationship, the master may be completely happy with being served, having the stay-at-home slave, and doing everything he can to make sure that his slave is happy, but may not realize that the slave now wants the opportunity to be able to go to school and to be socialized. And that's going to hit master from way left field when the slave decides to initiate this conversation. And that's why I said, you kind of have to have that time span ready when you plan to do this, because at that point, the power dynamic there just went out the window. You were happy having the slave, and your slave all of a sudden is telling you that they're not happy with the relationship anymore.
Okay, you brought up a good point. That slave all of a sudden. Okay, maybe that is one of the keys to breaking up well. Is let's not break up all of a sudden.
The time frame, like
talking through these things, voicing concerns as they happen, communicating, and maybe it's going downhill and maybe it's not coming back. Maybe it's a lost cause. But resenting somebody for 3 months and then finally just saying, you know what, I'm fucking sick of you, I am so out of here, that is a hard pill to swallow. And I think it's counterproductive for breaking up badly. Breaking Bad. No, good.
Maybe I was thinking about this or giving too much credit to the participants, but I would hope that nobody does that. And I know that there's a lot of idiots and a lot of assholes in the world, but hopefully people that are used to talking and having negotiations and are self-reflective, they don't just let it fester for 3 months and decide, okay, bitch, you're gone. Hopefully they've both been able to recognize the decline of the relationship for 3 months or X number of weeks or whatever it turns out to be, and they try their best to come back together. If it's not working, the more dependent partner needs to start thinking of, oh, well, gee, what should I do? What can I do? What would I do? Where would I go? Who would I live with? Where would I work? So, yeah, in general, I think my advice is don't jump the gun. Don't have somebody in your house being your personal 24/7 slave for 10 years and just throw them on the street. That's an asshole move for sure.
Well, I'm going to follow that up, David. And this is, again, why I started with breaking up is a skill.
My name's Brian. It's nice to meet you.
Oh, Brian, sorry. Sorry, I didn't.
The dude's name.
Go ahead.
I know.
Where the fuck is my banner? Where's my banner?
I ran away from the chat. But what you perceive as an asshole or a lame thing to do might just be somebody's inexperience and fear of going into this. Not having a backbone is a personal trait, but it is something you can train yourself to do. Um, and I think the other thing that we need to talk about is that time frame of breaking up. I think Michael touched on that, and I think the best way to talk about that time frame is in the stages of grief, because there's going to be negotiating, there's going to be when it suddenly hits and you accept it. I'm not familiar with the 7 steps of grief or 12, however there may be. But I think helping your partner start on that right path when you decide that the relationship is not going to go is part of that skill. And some people break up badly because they don't have the personal experience or knowledge to go through about it. And that's not something everybody's supposed to have. You're not supposed to know how to break up well.
Yeah, and sometimes relationships do blow up. Sometimes that's just what happens.
Sometimes somebody fucked up really bad, and it's just,
Or sometimes you really do have that slow burn where you're like, I'm not totally happy, but I'm not totally sure what to do, and then you wake up one day and damn it, I don't want to be with them anymore. That happens, and that doesn't make you an asshole. I disagree. Sometimes you got to work it out in this slow way, and I'd rather kill it before you suffer those 3 months, but sometimes you just have to feel it to figure it out. I think what you do after that is what we can talk about. Because I'm not real comfortable telling anybody, how to break up with someone. That's really hard. That's really hard to do. It's very individualized. But after, you've decided it's not going to work out, that's where you turn into an asshole for me. How you handle that is what totally makes or breaks you. And one of those I know for me that I think is really kink specific is people a lot of times who are breaking up from a kink relationship. There are a lot of dynamics here that you're fooling with at that point. You weren't just boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever you were. You had a power exchange relationship. Maybe you had a service relationship. Maybe you had all these other things. And a lot of people will try to preserve one of those. Very commonly, they'll try to keep one thing like service. And sometimes that can lessen the burn. Sometimes that can be a really productive way that the two of you can still respect each other and interact with each other, but maybe you take the sex out and you take the dating out. Sometimes in a kink relationship, I think that can be a productive thing, but my how to break up well advice in that, I don't personally like that for myself, but I've seen it be a productive thing. The thing about that I just wanted to point out was this idea of boundaries. We're so good at boundaries when we're in a relationship, and then after we break up, we suck at them. It's like we forget all that talking that we did about boundaries and all these great lofty ideas we have about them. You got to have a boundary. Are you going to kiss on the mouth after you break up? That kind of a thing. You need to talk about it because it's an opportunity for more hurt feelings. It's an opportunity for confusion and a lack of closure. Are you going to have service or not have service? What is yours and what is not yours? Where are you going to do those kinds of things? Those boundaries are important in a relationship. In my opinion, they are just as important or maybe a little more important after you've quote-unquote broken up.
Josie, this doesn't sound like you're talking about a breakup at all. This talks about like just a change of the relationship. If you're still talking about are we going to kiss, are we not going to kiss, can I still do service for you? Maybe we're still going to do these things, but maybe where changes.
I could still want to hug you if I see you at an event. I could still want to, be near you. You don't have to hate each other just because you're broken up. You can still be friendly.
Well, I think that's one of the things you negotiate at the breakup. We're part of this community. Do you want to maybe go every other Saturday so that we don't run into each other for a while and just let the pain that happened heal? And then, sometime down the road when we see each other, you get that awkward glance, a little wave, invite without, trying to reopen that wound, because that can happen. But I think that's actually one of the stages of grief that I was talking about. Bargaining happens with the person that's losing the relationship, not the person that decided to. And as the person who's deciding to let the relationship go, you kind of have to go ahead and in your mind have those hard limits because your partner's gonna try to bargain and keep you in, keep whatever they can, and I think at that point, it like a Band-Aid. I'm a fan of the Band-Aid. Let it rip off, let that pain happen, and then give it some time to heal before you get there.
Now, Ray, you brought up negotiating the breakup, and I think that's a good point. I'd like to also just kind of throw out there that try not to negotiate the breakup furious. Like,
Yeah.
have
Take
your
it.
fight, have your blow up, yell and scream and throw shit or whatever it is that people do when they break up. But don't scream, oh, I never want to see you again, and you better not show up at the munch, and I will swear to God I'll walk out if I see you. Let those things cool off for a couple days or a week or however long it takes, and then come back. And I obviously I can't tell anyone not to negotiate a breakup hurt, because obviously there's going to be hurt from one or both sides, but don't negotiate a breakup furious.
Would it be? I have some confidence in the relationships that I'm in, that I'm not going to. I mean, unless it's like somebody's fault, I did something horrific, or they did something horrific to me, I feel pretty good. The people that I choose to be involved with are sensible people. And not that they won't be sad or hurt or even mad, but just that it won't be, monkeys flinging shit at each other afterwards. We'll be able to, have a discussion of sorts and maybe some negotiation. How much cool down time do you need? Should we not run into each other? Should we be out of contact for a certain period of time? What can I do to not rub it in your face, inadvertently? I'm fairly certain that I can have those kinds of conversations. I'm not sure that everybody can. I wonder, I brought this up a little bit earlier. Is it better to negotiate a breakup while you're still in love and still together? Or does all that just go out the window once somebody gets hurt?
I think that's two different energies. We were talking about the new relationship energy, the NRE, and then I think you've got and I keep going back to the stages of grief, and I finally looked them up. Denial, anger, like Brian said, negotiating, then kind of getting into that depression and eventually accepting it. And that's a different energy. Nobody wants to buy a new car thinking, I better get the insurance because I'm going to wreck it. You want to enjoy it. I think at some point after you've let the energy come to a stable place in a relationship, you might want to negotiate a breakup. But I would never say be that pessimist and just know that a relationship is going to end in one of the two mathematical possibilities.
See, and I've been called cynical before. But
Mr. Kill the NRA and negotiate your breakup before you throw it up.
This gets really cynical.
Up to look like an awesome partner right now.
This gets really cynical because
we also have no fun and we go nowhere. Is that what you're also saying?
Yeah, because
is there a severance package?
No problems, right? No, this is about as cynical as it gets with relationships. A close friend of mine, who some of you know, has experienced in polyamorous relationships, and one of the things that they say quite often is, I go into relationships knowing full well or expecting that they will end at some point. And that had a profound effect on me, that every relationship I've been in or now involve myself in, I expect will end. And I would be thrilled if they didn't, and I'm not going to sabotage it or kill it in the cradle, but I am ready. I understand, like the conversation in the entering into relationships, where Brian, you had said, the chances of that are what are the chances? They're not 50-50 that this relationship's going to survive or not. They're probably more like 5 and 95. So.
How many X's do you have versus how many currents do you have?
Yeah.
That ratio is the answer.
Right. So call it cynical if you want, but I think it's one of the things that has helped me be a good breaker-upper. Not even when I'm not doing the breaking, when somebody's breaking it off with me, for that I have kind of worked this into my head that I didn't have the expectation that this was going to last forever till death do us part. That and I think the biggest thing for me, and I have told some people that I've gotten involved with in recent years, that when this isn't good for you anymore, you need to tell me, and you know what'll happen? I will let you off the hook. I will make it as easy as I can for you to walk away from me, because then I'm providing an environment in which they can, they're not gonna, I'm not gonna start throwing shit or, calling them names or holding their pets hostage. That I'm giving them an environment that they can be honest with me, so that when it needs to end, it doesn't go on for 3 months or 6 months or 2 years after it should have already been over. But then really do try to make it as easy as possible for them to walk away. Because
Yeah, but you can't keep reinforcing that. You can't keep reminding them of that, because at a certain point, all that person is going to hear is, "It's okay if you want to break up with me." I mean, if you want to break up with me, you can do that. I'm just reminding you, if you want to break up with, because at that point, I'm going to start hearing, "Please break up with me because I don't want to do it, and I'd really like that you would do it." I think that's the problem with that, is that you can do it in the beginning, and that makes you seem like a nice guy, and you can do it kind of once you've been together for a little while to reinforce that, no, I was being totally serious about that. Like, I care about you, and I would make that easy for you. But you can't keep doing that over and over again. So if you don't have someone who's going to remember that, that can be tough.
See,
but
I
you
don't know.
also have to make good on it. You have to, when it does happen, you can't, I mean, that's, if you just look at it in the, Ray, you were talking about the stages of grief and the bargaining, and I don't really want to bargain with somebody who doesn't want to be with me. And I know a lot of people do, and I'll change this and I'll stop doing that, and we can make this work, and I'll fix all the things that are wrong.
And I'd like to relate that grief to the NRE, where it kind of intoxicates you. You don't think clearly because you're starting to think more emotionally, so your rational train of thought just kind of derails, and you become a mess. And I think it is the responsibility of the person breaking up with you to let you have that, and then they kind of, again, becomes a skill where you learn to let things go and accept things. That the mature point of view is that we're either, every relationship is going to end one way or another, whether it be 2 weeks from now, we're just going to lose that spark, or we're going to be married for 25 years and one of the partners dies. I agree with you. Every relationship is going to end. How is the mystery, and the journey is what we need to accept.
Well, I agree with Michael, what he's saying. I think the thing that I most agree with is this idea of taking it on yourself, taking that responsibility to be the one who breaks up well. I think that's the single best piece of advice that I could give to anyone who's struggling with this whole idea, or has historically not broken up well, however that has looked, and it can look a lot of crazy ways. I think that the best thing that you can do is be the one. Don't expect the other person to break up with you gracefully or well or early. Don't do that. Take it on yourself to be the one who. And when I say negotiate the breakup, I probably wasn't very clear. What I'm kind of talking about are setting boundaries for your breakup. I'm mostly saying set them for yourself. I'm not saying sit down across the table with someone and have a negotiation about it, because quite frankly, I've never done that. And it's really great advice to give someone, but how many people are actually going to follow it? I don't think there are that many. But for myself, I can sit down and say, all right, what can I be okay with, and what can I not be okay with? If when we first break up, I need you to not hug me when we run into each other, and I need you to just kind of give me some space, that's something I can say to you. Because if I set myself up in the position where I expect you to be a mind reader and just do it, I'm setting myself up for a lot of disappointment and anger and whatever other emotions I'm going to feel from that, and I'm going to have a bad experience of it.
Mm-hmm. And now, and this goes to your point, I mean, you can't be responsible for other people's actions. You'll break up with people that aren't very good at this, and it's going to be messy. They're just going to make it messy. It's going to be, they're going to make it as hard on you as possible. So you have that discussion with them and say, what I need from you in order to make all of this less crappy is this. And they're going to say, well, you fucked me over. You're the reason we're not together anymore. You broke my heart. I don't owe anything to you, so fuck you. I'm gonna hug you, whatever. That
So that
I
brings up an interesting point, Michael. What are the responsibilities of a person who's been told that the relationship's going to end? The person who's being broke up with. Do you have a responsibility to let that happen, or is it your responsibility because you're still in love, for say, lack of a better word, to try to fight and hold on to the relationship?
Well, that's too individualized for any of us to answer for anybody else.
yeah, and I don't know when we're saying the word responsibility. I know it's as close a word as you can come to. I get what you're saying. I wouldn't expect anybody to fight for me, and I wouldn't want them to. I want them to make it as easy on me because I didn't just wake up one morning and on a whim say, you know what, I'll break up. I could always get back together with them if I haven't really made up my mind. No, if I'm breaking up with somebody, it's because I feel like, something's wrong and it can't be fixed and we have to go our separate ways. It's not something that I would do lightly. So I wouldn't want, to fight for me because then I think they're just, bargaining and trying to slap a Band-Aid on it, but the real problems are still going to resurface again in a matter of, might be days, probably more like weeks or months, but we're still going to end up with the same problems that we had before. So
sometimes you fight for a relationship and it works out just fine. You guys, cynical dudes, all of you.
I'm actually going to take. I'm gonna be out of character here and take a non-cynical approach to this, and I'm gonna agree with Josie that
Whoa.
I know it. This is non-cynical Brian for 5 seconds here. I agree. I think sometimes in some situations, and pardon us, we're having some technical difficulties because Josie has fainted. I think that sometimes in some cases it can happen where a partner says, hey, you know what, this just isn't working, we can't make this work, this and this and this is wrong and broken, and the other person can step up to the plate and say, you know what, I haven't been good enough, I haven't been attentive enough, I haven't been X, Y, and Z, and you know what, the thought of losing you has, really inspired me to do better, and those types of things can work out. I really do believe that, but when it can't be fixed, it can't be fixed.
But after I have broken up with that person, we're past that point. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
For you, but I think expecting that person's problem.
That we've already had the conversation of I'm unhappy, and this is why. And that person has made it clear that they won't change or can't change, or maybe it's not a question of changing, it's just that we're not jiving together. So by the time I break up with them, or I give them the benefit of the doubt that by the time they're breaking up with me, they really fucking mean it, and they have worked it out and, tried every angle. They've moved the puzzle piece around as many, and it just doesn't, they can't make it fit. So I give them the benefit of the doubt that this isn't just a lark, that they're saying, well, I'll break up with him and then he'll be sorry, or I'll break up with him and then I'll probably get back together with him in a couple of weeks after we, have a fight. I respect the finality of it, and I want the finality of my decision to be respected as well. Now, if I say to somebody, I don't think this is working, and I think we should split up, and they go, "Oh, good," maybe I won't feel so good. But there's a difference between, fighting. I guess, I can change, and we can do this, and let's do this. We've already had our chance to do all of that, and we either haven't. We've shown ourselves as being unwilling or unable.
I mean, I would hope that someone wouldn't use breaking up with someone as a tool.
But
for that.
They do. They do.
Right, and that's just why I want to point it out, because I know that some people in this room have an opinion about that. I agree. I don't think that's a good strategy to have. Some people, though, they get caught up. They don't know what else to do but to tell you, listen, I can't do this anymore. Like, we're done. That's, I think, an okay thing to do. Sometimes you just don't know what to do. However, you should never do that expecting the other person to be the white knight and come on back and convince you that everything's going to be great. I think that's the mistake. That's a great way to break up not well at all. Because now you're going to think that he's an asshole because he didn't try to win you back and he didn't try to make it better and he took you seriously when you said you wanted to break up with him.
I know. Shame
If
on
that
him.
person wants to come and say, listen, like we need to talk more about this. This is coming out of left field. We've never talked about this before. Why are you suddenly taking the nuclear option? If they want to do that, that can be a productive conversation. But you shouldn't do it expecting that to be the outcome. That's a great way to be bitter and upset and to never be able to be in the same room with that person again. We've seen that. We've all seen that.
Hmm. Agreed.
Okay, so I've just had kind of a write-in, kind of a personal write-in question comment. What are the um, what are the obligations or non-obligations about online posts? For instance, changing your status on FetLife or posting it on Facebook. Should you, shouldn't you? How should that be handled? What does that look like?
That is a really good way to be a shitty person and be able to deny it.
Yeah, don't do that.
I'm gonna put a post up on here about my heart being, or I'm gonna recite some poem lyrics about somebody ripping your heart out and stomping on it on the floor, and then
Or
I'll
better
send.
than that, you're gonna
Then,
say, "I'm fine. I'm not upset. I'm not mad at all. Okay, I just changed my status. Stop asking me about it because I don't want your attention." Yes, you do.
I think that's a pretty petty thing to do, to just go. That's kind of like saying, "Hey, you are now the worst thing that I've ever done. I want all your friends to know that I'm now available."
Yeah.
I think that does need to be brought up in the negotiating of the breakup. You know, do you give the person a little bit of time before you change that, or you just let them know it's going to happen, and I don't mean any ill will about it. People are going to find out. So
Well, change
I'm
the
just
status,
going
but
with
you
that.
don't need to write a journal entry about why you did it. No one is
I
entitled to
agree.
that information. Nobody.
And that's the problem with having a community when you're breaking up in a relationship, is that it's gonna be leaked out, and you know, there may be people who take one side or the other on that breakup, and all of a sudden you've got people rallying for the victim in the relationship, and it all really depends on who got their story out first. Everybody knows there's two sides to every story.
or who's more involved, like who people see more often. You know, if you, yeah, I feel you on that. And this to me, when I look in the community, because I did want to talk about the social aspect, not just parents and children and friends, but kink community people that may know both of you. That's one of the reasons why we're even having this topic at all. Breaking up well. Well, who cares? You should. You should care about breaking up well, because there are great things that come from it that, especially in a community as narrow as ours, that you are probably going to have to run into these people in the future. You're probably going to have to be equipped to see them play with other people in the future, or fall in love and have DS relationships with other people. And you have to really, do some work on that. But the benefits are outrageous. The benefits of being able to do that well, are immeasurable. The thing is, I look at this point kind of as the measure of a person. When they can't break up well, when they can't seem to take the high road, when they make the vague posts on the social media sites, when they are getting their story out, they're just telling everybody what a shithead the other person is. Maybe they were a complete shithead. Maybe they fucked up really bad. But to me, it seems like, this is my personal, this is what I ask of people when I break up with them. Look, you have your friends, you have this person, you have that person, you're very close. I understand. You need somebody that's just going to pile on with you and let you know that you were right and I was wrong, and everybody needs those people. Everybody needs cheerleaders at that time, and that's cool. A couple of them. But the rest of the folks in this community, is it really their business? Is it? I feel like the high road, somebody who isn't a close friend of mine, oh, you're not with so and so anymore. What happened? It just didn't work out.
That's the way to do it. It
That's
just
the
didn't work.
That's the canned answer that I give. Didn't work out.
And
oh,
you know
well, you
what?
guys seem so happy. Yeah, just didn't work out.
I agree. I agree completely. That's the way to handle it. And I know that we have at least one person on this panel that loves to write, and I think there's a lot of catharsis in writing. And Josie, you'll agree with me here. And I'm not suggesting anybody don't write. I'm just suggesting don't post it.
Mm-hmm.
See, and I would disagree there. I think that you can
What? That was for you.
I know, but I'm speaking from experience.
Okay.
If you are someone like me who is a prolific poster or who has a following, I think you can say, getting on there and saying, Brian is an asshole, he broke up with me. Not cool. Not cool. If you want to write something creative because that's how you grieve, I think you need to preserve some anonymity there. I think that's a nice thing to do. I think that if your post ends up coming out it's just so clear that you're giving a blow-by-blow of who you just broke up with and how it happened and when it happened and all those things, I would hope that that's not something that you post.
That I agree with completely. I'm with you there.
Some of that, right, and just put out what you need to be okay. That's all right, but you're right.
Yeah, no, I kind of meant the blow by blow. Here's what happened. Here's everything this guy did. Don't post that. Write it, but don't post it.
This is why I consider that to be, the measure of a person, because it is fucking hard to do. When you're hurt, or you were actually wronged, you were wronged, and you are able to take the high road to say, instead, when somebody asks you that question, you say, just didn't work out. Not because, it's some big secret or whatever. It's because that person doesn't need to know. They don't need to know your business or anybody else's. The people close to you, the people that need to know probably already know. And those are the people that you say, oh, he did this and then that, and can you believe this? Okay, those people are going to get the full story. Either that or they're going to get a fully slanted story from a certain perspective. That's fine too. It's just it hurt when I see people doing that, talking to people that I know that they are not very close to, venting about their private relationship with another person to kind of get their story out, to grab attention, to gain sympathy, or worse, to get people to choose sides.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a very small person. A big person doesn't get caught up in that. But man, that is hard. That is really hard to do. So, breaking up well, I said there are benefits to this, especially in a community as narrow as the BDSM community, because in most areas, in most cities, we kind of all know each other, and you walk into a room. I mean, I've been around in Louisville for a number of years, and I walk into a room and I'm like, well, I played with that person, I slept with that person, I used to date that person, and it's great that we can be cool, but if we decided that we weren't going to be good breaker-uppers, that would make the whole thing very uncomfortable for a very long time, and hurt the community even, causing problems in it.
So your prospects for the future. I don't want to date you if I know that you broke up spectacularly with Rachel or whoever it was.
Yeah, well, the people who partake in this kind of thing hope that they're hurting their partner's prospects by telling everybody what a douche they are. But
right.
it always for me it feels a different way. It feels like I would never want to be involved with you because you're sitting here talking to me about it and I don't know you that well. Oh, good, we got Ray back. So, let's look at some of these. Let's see. do you enter into relationships with people who have a bad past record of breakups? I guess that's kind of something that we were just talking about. That do you consider breaking up well to be somebody with a record of breaking up well, or somebody who has good relations with their exes? I feel like the vanilla world sort of frowns on that. What? He still hangs out with his exes? Like you need to put them down. You need to, turn the page, move on. I can't have you being Facebook friends with the girl that you broke up with 2 years ago, because how do I know you're not going to hook up with her again? But I see it a little bit differently.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit just before I dropped out. I was just go back to Josie's point about being a prolific writer. I think it's okay to write as long as it's just informative and neutral in every way around. Just like the status update to say, hey, I'm single now, and I know I'm a follower of daily blogs. And that's a big event for somebody, and to just say, we broke up because it didn't work, is the same way you do it in person, the same way you do it in writing. And as far as dating somebody who's a bad breaker-upper, I think it says a lot about their person, that they don't have those skills of breaking up, like personal courage or a backbone. And if maybe you're looking for a slave or submissive, that's a feature you might find attractive, but you kind of already go in knowing that that's gonna happen.
That's going to be me someday that they're posting about. That's going to be me someday that they're talking about in such glowing terms to everybody in the community, and do whatever they can to cut me down. That's the kind of person I want to get involved with.
Right, and this is the same question as, would you date someone who's dated a crazy person in the past? And we all want to go, no, I would never date someone who dated someone so, tactless and personally who I find insane and unattractive. But then you meet them and you're like, but he's cute.
Yeah.
And then you change all these rules. So I can't say that.
You're drunk with NRE. You start making bad decisions, right?
You do. You get a little crazy with it. I wouldn't knock them out of my. I have learned that the wisdom that has come with enough age and experience. I have finally crossed over that. I can say that. I would still date them if they broke up poorly. I would still date them if they dated a crazy bitch. I would keep that in the back of my mind, though. It would stay with me. I would always have that in the back, and I would always be on guard, especially in the beginning, for other warning signs of that behavior. Yeah. And it would tarnish the relationship a little bit. It'd make it a little more difficult for me to open up with them. It'd be a lot more difficult for me to consider them a longer-term partner. It would hurt your prospects with me if I knew this about you, and I think a lot of people feel that way.
Now, are we talking about the person who's doing the bad breaking up, or the person that got broken up with badly? Because that's two sides of the same coin.
How that person reacted to getting broken up with badly is just as bad as breaking up badly.
So if your friend told you that, hey, John over there was dating so-and-so, and I heard, he's a big asshole, do you still follow along because you've only heard one side of the story? Or
yes, but I think it falls into risk-aware kink. This feels the same to me. Like, know what you're getting into, and if you want to enter into it a little bit more cautiously, like Josie said, do it. If you want to, turn around and walk out, walk the other way as quickly as you can, do that too. But part of the benefit of having community is having people that can vouch or not vouch for other people. And we skipped over this topic in the first portion, which was how to enter in a new relationship. And we talked about, you can talk to your friends and find out who's cool, who's not cool, who's in line with your views, who may not be, who can vouch for who. And I think that's especially important for bottoms to get potential tops vetted out. But the same goes for figuring out who has had a good breakup, who's had a good history of relationships, who's had a really poor history of short, tumultuous serial relationships. And if you If the person is hot enough and you've got the butterflies bad enough, go ahead and do it, but know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, don't expect that it's going to be any different when it ends.
Right. If the
if
person
you're
has
okay with
only
that, if
dated
you're
crazy bitches
if-
and now he's interested in you, you may want to think about that long and hard.
All right. Well, let's wrap that up. A great topic. Thanks everybody for participating. Thanks to all the viewers. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a whole brand new topic, but I think we're going to be signing off for now. So there you have it.